Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Your Story Matters conversation with Kelli Oblernodorf. She is a trained facilitator of the Spiral Method and a certified life and recovery coach. Kelli is highly skilled and experienced in interpersonal dynamics. Her facilitation and coaching style encourages others to make a difference in their lives through connection and intuitive communications. Kelli creates an environment where each person feels seen and supported on their path to success. And Kelli specializes in creating supportive one-on-one coaching and small community group facilitation that provides a safe space for true, authentic relationships and community to emerge. Kelli's leadership allows for open communication and deep connection between clients that create an environment where trust and curiosity can arise. She is also an author of the book, The Rock in the Bowl, Not Your Average Relationship Book. And she provides support for women who may be struggling with alcohol and/or relationships in their lives. I'm excited to deep dive into this conversation with Kelli today, and just to hear about her journey and her story. How did you get to this place, and let's talk a little bit about your book as well. I'd love to hear more about that and how
Yes.
that surfaced for you,
Sure.
and a little bit more about it, so people, if they are looking for not your typical relationships book,
Yeah.
and where they can get it, that kind of stuff. But I'm
Sure.
sure coming into this life and recovery coach arena, it had to, like a lot of us coaches, we typically come into this space because of our own personal journey. So tell me a little bit of what brought you into this space.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Stacy. I feel really honored that you have chosen me to come on and share my story with your community, especially community of women. I really think making a stand for women is so important in our world. We really need each other and lift each other up. So I feel really honored to be here. So thank you so much
Thank you for
for
being
one.
here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey into becoming a coach was certainly a personal one. For one, it's a career change. I was in healthcare for about 13 years as a healthcare administrator, and just really was not getting my needs met as just a person, a human. It was not the career that really ended up feeling good for me to stay in long term. And so I took a personal sabbatical about a year and a half ago and decided to just think about what I wanted to do with my life. And I always kind of saw myself as a teacher and or as a counselor, but decided not to go on that path in particular. I do teach college. Actually, I do teach at the University of Denver for their healthcare administration. So I'm fulfilling that particular passion of mine is to provide education and support for students, particularly adult learners. So I do that. That's my part-time job, as well as being a coach and a life and a recovery coach. And so my journey to recovery coach in particular is certainly a personal journey. I had some dependence on alcohol for many, many years. And I found myself going through long bouts of sobriety, followed by even longer spells of drinking pretty heavily in my life. And that is I have a family history of that. My father, my grandfather, my grandmother, and many family members, especially on my father's side, suffer from alcohol dependence. And I certainly and unfortunately got that gene and have had to use that as a life lesson. And so it's certainly been a life journey. And it was about a year ago, I went through a course through a woman that her name is Jody Ventura, and she does a program it's a mindset program around alcohol. And it was the first time that I really became complete with my experience with alcohol. So a lot of times we have these societal messages, especially for women. We have mommy wine culture. We have messages almost every single day around alcohol and how we have to use it for every aspect of our lives, right? So if we're sad, we go and drink. If we are celebrating, we go and drink. If we're bored, we pick up a glass of wine, whatever it is, right? So we have all these societal messages that we hear coming towards us, and it creates a lot of pressure for people who struggle with alcohol. And I certainly fell victim of that, and felt really that I would sort of get tired of where I was in my life and decide, okay, this is it. I'm not going to drink anymore. And I would be successful for a period of time. And then I would find that it would start creeping in, like, oh, I can just have one glass of wine. I have got this under control. And quickly I would figure out I didn't have this under control. And so I continued to go on this sort of cycle. Every few years, I would sort of stop drinking for a year or so, and then I would start drinking for 3 years, and it just kind of kept going on and on and on. And after doing some really personal work, I decided to go through this program, and it was really helpful, especially in changing my mindset around alcohol use. And that was I felt the most complete and also the most inspired after doing that program. And what it was inspiring was to provide community resources and support, particularly for women, although I don't only work with women, but particularly with women. I found it inspiring to create community. And so I created a program called Sober Collectives. And that is, I have two groups. One is Sober Collectives and the other one is Sober Sister Collective. And that's a bi-weekly group that meets, we meet virtually. And I use the spiral method facilitation, which is a facilitation style that really allows us to become deeply related with one another very quickly. So we play a series of games, and those games help us dive deep into some of the areas that we are blocked in. And we just use that through the art of curiosity, the art of asking questions, being curious about our experience, but also being curious about someone else's experience, because typically we learn through watching or listening to somebody else. And so that process and that community experience can be incredibly impactful for others. And so that's how I sort of came into work around recovery. And then also becoming a recovery coach gives us the opportunity to work one-on-one with each other and get even deeper into what are our mindsets around alcohol? Why is it so difficult for us to get off of substances, and what keeps us from living healthy, sober lifestyles? And so I'm really inspired to help women in that way, help people in that way. And so that's a little bit of my journey on how I got here today.
Yeah, I love it. So out of curiosity, when did the drinking or that dependence on alcohol start in your journey of life? How old were you?
So, I mean, I drank as a teenager, and, like most teenagers do. But it really started actually after the birth of my first child. So, and that child will be 18 next month. So it's been about 18 years since that happened. I had a very traumatic birth. I had to have surgery after my emergency cesarean about 6 weeks later, and I had an ovary removed. And that sent me into some pretty severe postpartum depression. And it went undiagnosed. So a lot of times when we have undiagnosed mental health issues, we self-medicate. And so alcohol became a self-medication for me to cope with some of the really deep-seated issues that were happening in my life. How to be a mother, how to be a wife, how to properly parent, and how to be myself, how to be an individual. And all of those things became really unclear for me. And So I started drinking as a way to cope with that. And it sort of snowballed from there. I was, I got pretty deep into it for about 3 years, and until I came out of it, and kind of got real with myself about that. It didn't mean that that was the end of the journey, certainly, but it certainly brought my awareness more deeply into what was going on, that I could actually take some action around it. And the fact is, alcohol is addictive. It just is. You could have no family history of alcohol and you can still become addicted. And so that is, a reality that even though we use these things to cope, sometimes those addictions start for one reason, but they continue for another reason, for other reasons. And one of those reasons is that it's addictive. Your brain starts to become dependent on it. And that isn't anybody's fault. That's not your fault. That's not my fault. It's not my fault. Right. But I can still take responsibility for it in my life. Right. So, so that's how it kind of evolved over time.
Right. So having alcoholism in your family history, what was that like an evident appearance growing up as a child? Like, did you see your parents really struggle with alcoholism?
Yeah. My dad really did struggle, and unfortunately, he was never able to overcome that in his life. And he passed away earlier this year. And it brings me sadness to know that he wasn't able to see the other side of that. But I did see that growing up, and I didn't live with my father. My parents were divorced when I was 2. I knew my father my whole life, but it was hard because he wasn't very emotionally available for me. And he was in deep, deep denial about his alcohol use, pretty much till the day he passed away. And I never thought he was an alcoholic, never thought that he had any sort of problem, or at least if he thought he had a problem, he wasn't being present to that problem. And so, that was, it was easy to see how that gets to be a habit, but then to not be able to come out of that it always has brought me a little bit of sadness, because it's somebody who understands how free you can be and how wonderful it is to be free of that burden. It makes me sad that that's how his life was, but that was his journey, right? And we all have a journey, and we all have a cross to bear, and that is that is one of mine, and that was one of his. And so for me, it's really important to speak to my kids about alcohol. I'm very open with them. They know all about my struggles. They know, especially my teenager who is experimenting with alcohol, right? And he has done it. He does do it sometimes, but it is something I will never stop talking to him about what his family lineage is. And he knows. He's like, I know, Mom. Like, I have to be so careful, and and so it doesn't mean he won't fall victim to it, but at least I've given him the best opportunity to be present around it, to be aware about it, so that he can enter his, very quickly around the corner manhood that he's stepping into with as much awareness as possible. And I think that is a lesson that I've learned, that, conversely from my father, who never talked about it and who never admitted it, I can make that change for my family. I have that power to do that. And so I take every opportunity. I know he gets super tired of me talking about it sometimes. I'm like, but really, sorry, you're always going to hear about this for me. So
that's right. And you're really like you said, drawing that line in the sand. You're creating a new dynamic for your next generations, like that legacy that you're creating of living a sober life is so empowering. I remember when I was coming into that teenage, like at 18, started to go to the clubs and what have you. And I have an older brother who's about 3 years older than me. he said something to me. He's like, Stacy, like, go out, have fun, but be careful. Alcoholism runs strong in our family. So just be always in control.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me because those words, and then just looking at the lifestyle that I grew up in, there was lots of alcoholism, lots of drug abuse. As kids, it wasn't uncommon to sit in the living room at a family function. Like my parents would have some people over and they would be smoking marijuana and passing this joint around, and we as kids would be helping pass that joint around. Like it wasn't uncommon. And and I remember even, I think I was grade 4, grade 5, my mom had pulled me out of bed. She had lots of mental health issues, and so that was her coping mechanism, was drugs and alcohol. And every once in a while she needed a friend or a counselor or somebody just to listen to her, and so she would pull me out of bed and sit me at the kitchen table and just pour out all her emotions. And she asked me if I had any questions for her this one night. And I said, well, and at first I didn't know what marijuana was at that stage of my life, even though it was so evident in our life. It was everywhere in our childhood. I had asked, like, what is marijuana? And she pulls out her purse and a baggie and she starts rolling up a joint at the kitchen table at like 3 a.m. And she starts telling me how amazing it is and how it relaxes her and how it makes her more patient. And here I'm thinking as a kid, I'm like, man, well, then you should be smoking that all day, every day. That's all I can think, because I'm like, patience, you ain't got any of those, or, and so she rolled it up, and I'm like between 9 and 12 years old, and she's smoking this joint with me. She actually passed it to me and wanted me to smoke it with her. And looking back, I'm thinking, what was she thinking?
Right.
You're not setting me up for success in my life. And I've gone through my own struggles of addictions and dependency on substances, just trying to numb pain and numb things in my life. My mom had taken her life when I was 19 years old. And it was just like a snowball effect for me as when it came to like allowing myself the time and space to grieve. Like I had to be the strong one. I had to have it all put together, because that scenario that happened, my brother, who was the rock of our family, really, that snapped him. Like he really took responsibility, thinking that it was his fault, that he wasn't there to save her. And that took him on a really deep path of substance abuse. He is now, oh, thank God, he is now a recovering addict, and he is making better choices for his life and his family. And I'm so proud of the work that he's done, because it takes work, especially when you've been stuck in it for so many years. And you have this generational bondage that's attached to you, that it makes it even harder, right? Because you got it's in your DNA. I was born an addict, so I'm just like, I always had to be cautious. Like, how far am I going to cross? Step down that line or cross that line. And then always having to take a step back, be like, that's not how I want to live my life. Like,
you're really changing your heritage. It's amazing.
Yeah, and somebody has to. And I remember just even with my own healing journey, I remember asking God, I'm like, why did you put me with this family? Like, it's so dysfunctional.
I've had those thoughts.
And he's like, and I felt it in my heart. He's like, well, who else better than you? Like, you are like a strong tower, a lighthouse for your family to really just do the tough work, and to be able to show them that it's possible, that they can have that freedom too, and to pursue their dreams and their passions. Because then when we're stuck in that dependency mode, I find that we can have all the dreams in the world, but we don't have the ambition to actually walk them out. Do you find that was part of your story when you were stuck in that substance abuse?
Yes, absolutely. Like for me, I guess it's a blessing and a curse. I've always had deep insight about myself, like been able to look at myself and see what needs to be changed or shifted. And that's great for, identifying issues, but it's not great when you're in it and you feel like you can't make the change, right? That there's like some other force behind you making the change, or making, having these issues, or keeping me drinking in this particular case. And so to be aware of it is hard, because it's hard. It's hard on your self-esteem to know, I have this problem. I don't want to have this problem, but yet I have this problem and I don't know how to get rid of it in my life. And that it's self-deprecating. The thoughts that it's so hard on your self-esteem to feel like you have control, because you don't feel like you have control. You don't feel like you can make any changes, or if it is, you're going to have this like crazy rock bottom experience. And my rock bottoms were always more emotional than they were logistical. Thank goodness I never had a DUI or anything like that created other kind of external consequences. Mine were always internal consequences. And those consequences, it's like alcohol for me created its own mental health issue, right? So when I'm not drinking, I feel pretty dang confident, right? I'm kind of like, I'm outgoing, and I want to make a difference in the lives of others and in my life, and be supportive. But when I was drinking, I couldn't even do that for myself. And it created this kind of cycle of kind of self-hatred in a lot of ways. And you can't give, I could give that support to others, but I just couldn't give it to myself. And over time, I've really had to say, no, I have to give it to myself first. I have to believe that I am enough, that I deserve to be a happy, healthy woman. I deserve to be able to be there for my family. And I'm still learning that, even though I'm sober from alcohol, I'm still learning that lesson. I still have to say I'm enough, because sometimes I don't feel like it. And that's a journey. I think that's a journey for a lot of women, especially mothers, especially working mothers. We never quite feel like we're enough. So we use substances like alcohol to sort of drown that voice out, and numb those thoughts out, because it's easier to do that than confront the reasons why we don't feel like we're enough.
Right, because digging into the root of where that substance dependency is coming from, usually it's going to be a painful process.
Right.
We're going to have to be reminded of things that are bringing us to that space of dependency. And I know that, like, just from some people that are close in my life that really struggle in this area, it breaks my heart to see them really truly wrestle with their self-worth and to know who they are. Like, we can look at them and be like, man, you're funny, you're beautiful, you have so much to offer, but they don't feel that for their own selves. And then they get stuck in that bubble of dependency where they feel 10 feet tall and bulletproof when they're drinking, but then it is a depressant. Like, people think, like, in the moment,
Yes.
it makes them feel strong and like they can take on the world. But when you're coming off of that drinking binge or whatever it is, then it just pulls you deeper into that pit and keeps you more in bondage. And it's such a vicious cycle that we fall into, right?
Oh gosh, absolutely. You wake up in the morning and you just can't believe it. You can't believe that you drank so much. You can't believe that you feel so bad and sick, and your body feels awful, and you say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to drink today. But then lo and behold, you find yourself at the liquor store at 5 o'clock and with a tall glass of wine shortly after. And that cycle is incredibly difficult to break. Very difficult. It
And
takes a
that
lot of
shame,
courage.
that whole, like, tearing yourself apart when you wake up and you're feeling like, I should not have done that. I don't feel good about myself. I don't want to be doing these things. You know, in your heart of hearts that that's not the path of life you want to live. And then you just start continuing to tell yourself all these negative things that we come to believe, which aren't truthful. They're not how we were created. That's not the best that God has intended for us.
Right.
So tell me, darling, like when you obviously like you're coming into your sobriety, like actually having some success in this area of combating this addiction. How was it like raising because you're got an 18-year-old, so how was it like in your relationships with being a mom and a wife and working out in the world? And how was it like, were you able to maintain a long-term job? Did you work out of the home? So many questions. Look at me go.
I was very high functioning. So I managed to, keep my relationships intact for the most part. I have had jobs, I was, like I said, I was in a healthcare career for many years. I managed to move up in that career even, which I think is something that a lot of people can do. Alcohol dependence doesn't have to look like you've lost your job and you've lost your family and you've, on the streets. And, it actually typically doesn't look like that. Honestly, a lot of times it looks like high functioning, socially acceptable behavior. And so that was me. I come from a long line of functioning alcoholics. We've done a really good job figuring out how to solve that problem of hiding what's really happening and continuing the behavior at the same time. So I didn't, like I said, I didn't have those external consequences of losing my job, losing my license, losing my marriage. Not to say it didn't affect my relationships. One of my biggest tests in life is my patience. And so when you feel like crap and you're hungover and somebody, and I have my kid needs something or gives me an attitude or whatever, my patience is really thin. And so that does affect my relationships. At one point, my oldest son and I went to therapy together because I just couldn't figure out how to be a good mother with him. And so, and that was super helpful. I'm a big proponent of whatever works. Therapy was great for our relationship and completed a lot of things because I had a lot of guilt. I wasn't the mother that I wanted to be. I didn't live up to my own expectations, especially for the first 3 years of his life. So I had a lot of guilt around that. And even though a lot of what happened wasn't my fault, I still am responsible for my life. And so that kind of push and pull was really hard on our relationship. And so, yes, it absolutely affected my relationships. I'm super grateful that I, didn't have any lifelong consequences of that. But not to say it couldn't have happened. We've gotten close. There's been some close calls. So, yeah.
Yeah, we went through a season with our daughter. She's 24 now. And I know that my healing journey began, like I was 7 months pregnant when I lost my mom. And so that whole first 10 years, like, they say the first 5 years of a child's life is the most crucial developmental years. And my heart was to make sure that she had the best successful foundation to set her up for a really great life. But that first 5 years, I was wrestling with mourning my mom, trying to figure out how to forgive her and heal from the way I was treated when she wasn't here to have those conversations with. That was a huge challenge. I had an abortion when she was a couple of years old because I was a single mom. I was scared. I didn't know how to support her, and never mind bringing another one into the equation. So I felt like I had my back up against a corner. And when I had that abortion, that's when I kind of fell into some substance abuse to try to hide from my own shame of that
Sure.
decision. And then that just kind of spiraled into me being emotionally disconnected, which really she is a girl that needs that affirmation. She needs that reassurance. And I wasn't able to give that to her at that time, even though my heart wanted to give her the world.
Yes.
And then over the next 5 years, like her from 5 to 10, I was like, going deep diving and healing. That's when God got a hold of me and started kind of working through a lot of different traumas of my childhood, which then also kept me emotionally disconnected. And when she was 8, I had another child, got married and had another child. And then that caused some friction in because I was emotionally disconnected. Now there's this baby that needs all my attention, and she hasn't gotten my attention. And so that caused that feeling for her of feeling unloved or unwanted. That wasn't our intention, but that was how it was perceived on her side of things. And then in her teenage years was a roller coaster of events. She struggled with bulimia, and she struggled with suicidal thoughts, and just being like making sure that she always had 100% or an A+ student, just so that she found that doing that would give her some form of acceptance from us, which was a really bad scenario for her to have to attach her identity to her report card. Do you know what I mean? And it broke my heart when she took herself to therapy when she was going through university, and God bless her soul for doing that, because they were able to help her kind of walk through some healing and give her some courage to really truly tell us how she felt. And as hard as that was as a mom to hear, all of what she was going throughout her childhood, and it crushed me, because I was just like, you're right. Like, I'm so sorry. That was not my intention. My heart was to make sure that you were safe, secure, you could take on the world, that you're loved. And that was far from what she had received. And so I'm glad that our relationship has gotten a lot stronger, and it's really like she's becoming one of my best friends. So it's just really cool how God can still redeem the junk and
Absolutely.
and the broken.
We're always forgivable, right? Like,
Amen.
but it's more about us forgiving ourselves, right? For what our perceived shortcomings are.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about your book, Kelli. What inspired you to write this book? And tell me a little bit more about what the journey of this book brings to people.
Absolutely. So that's also a personal journey as well between my husband and I. So we sort of during this time in our lives, this young, when our son was young, and a lot of stresses, and I was abusing substance, alcohol, and we would always find ourselves in the situation where we would have an argument at like the worst possible time, right? Like he's leaving and going to work, and I'm trying to get Ryan ready for school or something, and something would trigger me or him, and we'd start lashing out at each other, and then it would just sort of like escalate into an argument, and then that's how we would start our day. And we started getting into this pattern of just really inappropriate times to bring up our relationship issues, things that were important for us to talk about. And so we realized we needed a way to communicate with each other, that we had something important to say to each other, but have it not be so in the moment, emotionally charged, and such. So we decided to create a system called the Rock in the Bowl. And it's really a simple system. You literally have a rock and a bowl, and you put it somewhere in your house that both of you frequent. So for us, our rock and bowl are in our bathroom, right in between our sinks. And so the rock lives outside the bowl for the most part, for the majority of its life, if you will, for lack of a better term. And if there's something that is triggering me or him about our interaction, maybe something happened, or there's a pattern, we don't feel listened to, or we don't feel respected, or whatever is there, we put the rock in the bowl. And it's not to say, I don't go run to him and say, I have a rock in the bowl now. He finds it. And then he has an opportunity to just sort of sit with it, like, okay, Kelli has a rock in the bowl. And he comes to the table when he's ready to listen to me. And that starts a conversation where if you receive the rock, it's your job to just listen, because our understanding is there's something really important that our partner wants to say, that they have to say to us. And so you just get to speak. You just get to sit and speak. And what that does is, number one, it takes out the emotion. I shouldn't say it takes out the emotion. It just takes out the impulsive emotion, right? So instead of lashing out, I have put a rock in the bowl. And so I know that up until, like, from now until the time he tells me he's ready to have a conversation, I get to process, what is it that I really want to say? It's not about him leaving the dishes in the sink, right? It's about me feeling disrespected because I put a lot of energy into making the house livable. And so when he leaves the dishes in the sink, I actually feel really disrespected, or I don't feel honored. And so we get to the heart of what that looks like, what that is. And then he says, I can, we talk about it. I get to speak. And then he says, is there anything else? And I get to say, is there anything else? Okay, maybe there is, maybe there's not. And then he repeats back to me what he heard. And that, it's a form of nonviolent communication. If anybody's ever knows about what that particular communication style is like, it's really getting to the heart of it, but not speaking in a way that's going to harm someone else, right? It's speaking in a way that is moving something forward, right? It's authentic communication. And so once that communication, I say, okay, I feel complete. I don't have anything else to say. He says, okay, can I take the rock out of the bowl? And then I say yes. And that rock comes out of the bowl. And what that does is it creates this deep connection between us that I feel so listened to. I feel like there was that he heard me. That's and right. So often in our partnerships, we get into cycles of communication, which lead to assumptions. They lead to projections. And it's just the way in which we're built, right? And so we actually have to try hard to stop those patterns. And so this is a really practical way of both reflecting on what is it, why are you putting a rock in the bowl? What do you actually have to say to your partner? And so that has created the stability in our communication, where if there's something to say that we really need to have listened to, our partner listened to, then there's a way that we can do that that's productive and leaves us both feeling loved and heard. So that's really the generation of the book.
That is so awesome. It's such a practical way to at least bring up conversation, and it gives that time and space so you're not having that attack defense happen that can turn ugly and say nasty things because that you don't mean. And I love how you have, the person that's receiving the rock be the listener and then ask and then share what they've heard, because the interpretation of our words is not always the way we want them to be perceived or to be received, right? So it's I love how you incorporated that piece as well, which is so, it would bring your relationship and your conversations a lot deeper, and that trust would just increase because you are being heard. And then if he did receive your words and they're skewed and discolored, then you have the opportunity at that moment to go deeper into that reasoning as to why you're feeling the way you're feeling.
Right.
That's so
Clarifying.
powerful.
Yes.
Good for you,
Yeah.
Kelly. That is.
Yeah, thank you.
So in your book basically explains like is it the journey of the rock in the bowl? And kind of giving
the forward is more about what the journey is, but it is mostly a practical way of, you're going to leave knowing exactly what to do and how to implement it inside of your relationship. And I've even shared this with families, and they do it for their family. So it really, you can do it sort of anyway. I actually had a rock in the bowl conversation with my best friend the other day, because we had an interaction and it didn't land for me. I didn't feel seen and supported by her. And so we don't have a technical rock in the bowl, but it was a conversation where I was able to say, I need to have a rock in the bowl conversation with you and share, and she knew exactly what that was. And so it can be used in a variety of different ways in relationships, but I find the partnership, because we usually pick partners who give us a real opportunity to grow. And so it's usually the things that come up for us usually come up within our partnerships. And so it's been incredibly effective for my husband, Justin, and I.
And do you, just out of curiosity, do you each have your own rock?
No, we share a rock.
Because I'm like, what happens if you both put a rock in the bowl at the same time?
Well, I guess whoever puts it in first gets the first conversation. That's never happened per se, but yeah. And one thing that you can do as well is sometimes receiving the rock creates some anxiety for the other, like, oh God, what did I do wrong? And so you can also, some people decide to put a little note in with the rock, if that creates anxiety for you or for your partner. You can always just say, just want to have a conversation about feeling respected around the house, or whatever the situation might be. You can also do that as well. That's an option.
That is such a powerful tool to bring into people's lives, because communication is so it's broken on the best of days.
Yeah.
And many years ago, I read this book called Love and Respect when it came to marriage. And it was basically like, men want to be respected, women want to be loved. If men aren't being respected, women aren't going to be loved the way they need to be loved. And then we're not going to respect our man because he's not loving us. And it just turns into this really vicious circle. Like, you don't love me, I don't respect you. And someone's got to break that chain and get off the crazy cycle. And so this concept that you're bringing into people's lives really helps them have those deep conversations so that they can be heard and respected and loved and cherished at the same time.
Absolutely. So, and the fact is that most of us don't know how to communicate. Communication isn't necessarily innate, it's learned. And so and a lot of times, like I know in my family, we didn't have good communication. We yelled a lot. And so I had to actually learn how to communicate. And so we have to put energy and intention into changing the way we communicate so that we create other and different, healthier patterning around it. Because typically our patterning isn't always the greatest. Most of us.
No, and words are challenging. Like when you're trying to express the emotion that's so overwhelming inside of you, how do you describe that without it coming out accusatory or aggressive in any way? Because our emotion is so real to us. And then we need to, like, you just da 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 da, like, or you always, those conversations that you're always like throwing that
Yes.
word always in there, or you
Sure.
never, which isn't always the truth, but in that
Sure.
moment, just like stuck in that
That's
idea.
what feels
So
real. Yeah.
yeah. And then giving yourself that time and space to, okay, I don't want to use the word always because that's not always the truth. Like, I don't want to use the word
Yes.
never because you do it on this and this occasion. Like, but right now I'm not feeling support. Like being able to choose
Yes.
your words wisely. So that
Absolutely.
I love what you're doing, and bringing
Mhm.
this rock and roll concept into the family, because it's a fun way to share and to be heard and to really ground our communication and establish healthier, stronger relationships for the future. So good for you. Like
Thank
what a
you.
what a great little seed drop that you got that's so powerful, Kelly. So
Thank
powerful.
you. Thank you.
So I am so blessed by you coming today and sharing your story with my community. If there's anybody here that is looking for a life and recovery coach, that would like some additional support, either one-on-one or you do group sessions as well, how would they go about getting in touch with you to get that support that they might be desiring and needing in their life as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple ways. I have two websites. I have my personal website, kellyoblernodorf.com, and that gives you some ideas about what I do. I also do organizational and leadership work as well, so you can see that on my website. And then if you're interested in more on the sober side, sober collectives, or sobercollectivecommunities.com is where you can go and check out a little bit more about what the sober community is, specifically around sober alcohol, being sober around alcohol. And then on both of those websites, you can send me a little note and I can get in touch with you, and we can set up a conversation. And I would love to talk to anybody who wants to have a conversation, regardless if you come into one of my communities or become a coach or become a client of mine. Regardless of that, I love meeting new people and hearing your story. So please don't feel like if you reach out, there's an expectation. We can certainly just have a conversation, and I can hear about what your journey is, and if there is a way I can support you, I would love to.
Yeah, and no judgment. And
Absolutely.
I love the fact that there's some coaches out there that claim like they work in this field, but they've never experienced or walked a mile in this area. But to know how hard the struggle is and to have
Mhm.
experienced some success in your own personal journey, I think that you have a lot to offer people that are stuck in the middle of their struggle. So,
Absolutely.
yes, I will put your websites in the bottom of this video that people
Great.
will be able to go to and to connect, because I have had a couple of personal conversations with people that are really wrestling in their substance abuse or alcohol reliance. And so it would be really great I'm glad that you've been able to come into this community and to share your expertise. And I love your spirit. You're very soft and very easy to speak to and talk to. And,
Thank you.
and so I'm sure a lot of the other women here that are looking for some additional support will find that same experience with you as well. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. Thank you so much, Stacey. I really honor the path that you're on and the stand you're making for your community of women. I think it's so important, and I feel really honored that I'm a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking this time today to share your story and to inspire and encourage um, the multitudes, because I believe that your story is going to be heard by many, many people. And I'm excited to see how your journey continues to unfold. Maybe you have another book in there, the Rock and the Bull Part 2.
Right.
I
Absolutely.
absolutely love that. And where would they be? Is your book available on Amazon, or is it on
Yes.
Audible or anything like that?
Yep. It's just on Amazon. It's a self-published book. So,
Good for you.
it is what it is. It's really mostly, I'm not, I don't prescribe myself as some phenomenal writer, but it is, I hope that you can walk away just feeling like you have a practical tool for your relationships in your life. And that's really the commitment of the book. So
I love it. I absolutely love that concept. So I might actually have to pick up a few and share them as gifts, because I think that honestly is such a brilliant idea to bring into people's homes. So may God continue to bless the selling of your book, and just taking that piece of wisdom that you've been able to bring into your family and find success in. May it just multiply in the world around you. So
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Stacey.
Well, thanks, Kelly. I do look forward to continuing this relationship, and
absolutely.
I wish you the best.
Thank you. You as well.
Great one.